Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an assortment of terrifying encounters, ones that you've never heard before. And I have a very interesting photo. A couple people asked about it, and I said, well, let me share it. And a very, very interesting, one of my favorite new video clips. I've seen it once on a TikTok and on my channel. So before we get into all that, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and guys, it definitely matters. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Today's first experience is very chilling. And the first time I read it, I was like, whoa, what do we got here? And then I reread it, and I started to think about things that I have learned on the channel and talking to other people, and I was like, we got something here. So let's get into this. Today's first encounter. To set the scene, it was Sunday, November 27th. I'm walking through the woods to avoid interacting with guests like the average antisocial teenager that I am. I have one of my uncle's dogs with me, a 250-pound Great Dane. As we are passing through a clearing, I state the size and breed of the dog to demonstrate how out of character his behavior will become. As we get about halfway through this clearing, he begins to walk slower and begins to whine. I assume he hurt his paw, so I check him over and find nothing. I turn around, and in my flashlight beam I can see a pair of eyes, about 4 feet off the ground, significantly taller than anything with eye shine in my area. I understandably freak out and start to back away. Then the most horrifying thing happens. It stands up. Whatever was watching me is now over 6 feet tall. And then it talked. It said help with no emotion or cadence behind it. Duke is losing his mind trying to get away, and I decide that's a reasonable plan. As we are running through the woods trying to get back to our house, I can hear the creature saying, help, help, always 5 seconds apart. We make it back to the house and get inside. For the next few nights, if I looked out the window, I could see those same eyes gazing into my soul from the woods. I don't know what it was, but I truly hope I never see it again. To answer some questions that you may have, it occurred in northern Oklahoma. There was no discernible gender to the voice. There was no discernible evidence when I went back the next day. Immediately, I am reminded of a subscriber about a year and a half ago who, while out at his hunting area where he and his dad go hunting, had an interaction with a werewolf, or what we call werewolves on this channel. They are very similar to a dogman, a smaller snout, human-like legs, and no tail, and much bigger than a dogman, almost resembling a Sasquatch with a snout, kind of. Now, while he had his interaction with this thing, it looked at him, and it did say help. And I just found that awful strange that that was what this creature said as well. So, I don't know. It's pretty baffling to me. terrifying as well. Let's get into some more. Today's second encounter. Myself and 4 of my buddies were on a 2-day hunt on a reserve. Day 1, at 8:30 in the morning, at about 500 yards from my spot, my buddy filmed a black bear. We only had muzzle loaders. They are like a Civil War style gun. You get one shot and then you have to reload with a ramrod and stuff, for those who do not know. I didn't see any deer, so at 2 p.m. after lunch, me and another buddy scout for a new spot. We found a strange animal trail and he drops me off. I tell him to pick me up and I'll be on the road after dark. He's about 7 miles away. I sit there from 2 p.m. till dark. All I see are loads of elk. The trail was not deer. It was an elk highway. So it gets dark and I creep down the road. Right at dusk, almost too dark to see, something crashes through the thick brush about 30 yards in front of me across the road. I think, maybe a deer. So I grunt call just to get a reaction and nothing. So I creep in thinking I can bust it if it's a deer. It doesn't budge. It's just sniffing like a dog. Sniff, sniff. I kick the ground and stomp, trying to bump it. It just kind of keeps sniffing. I remembered that bear, and I'm 10 feet from whatever this thing is. I slowly back into the feed plot behind me with one shot at my hip. I'm going to have to hip shoot it if it's a bear. I get 50 yards in the middle of the field plot, and a big bull elk off to my right in the full moonlight. I see something dive out of the brush into the thicket across the road to my left, so I run further out. It's a standoff. I shine my light into the thicket, and I see eyes reflecting back. They appear to be 8 inches apart and at least 4 feet off the ground. It's sniffing over and over. I'm like, where's my bro? It's full dark, and this thing is stalking me and using cover. My buddy lights start shining down the road, and this thing crashes through the brush anyway. I figure it's the bear, but I don't know. I'm turtle heading, and I'm not gonna lie. I had one shot in the dark, coyotes howling like crazy as well. Predators were out in full effect on the full moon that night. Alright guys, so the other day I had shared a video that Blue had caught, or Shy had caught on their Facebook page. They were doing a live feed and caught a Dogman run through their backyard. A lot of people were like, oh, that's fake, that's crazy, that's, this and that. It got a lot of mixed reviews. And it's like James, or Dark Waters, says, it's hard to fabricate a live stream. Well, Shy then agreed to do an interview with me a while ago, and I re-aired that. He's super nice person. That he really didn't even have time to do what he did, the interview, and he still did it with me. I'm glad that I was able to meet him through James. And so where he lives in Fort Pierce, there is this Dogman that lives in the woods behind his home. And he got a very, very captivating and chilling photo of that Dogman. And that photo is what you guys are looking at right now. It is terrifying. I don't know which is creepier, the photo or the video. Today's third experience. 2 years ago, I went to visit my family up in northern Minnesota around Labor Day weekend. I'm not going to give the exact location, but I will provide at least the general location where this happened. To keep this short, I'm hoping someone may have a similar experience or may have a general idea of what this thing or entity was walking around our tent. General location, Mary Brown Bridge. On that Labor Day weekend, my girlfriend and I were planning to spend some time camping with her family. Both of us were very excited to get away from the everyday city life and anticipated a much-needed low-key weekend. We arrived at the location at around noon on Saturday, and were greeted warmly by everyone. During the day and evening, we were enjoying ourselves with random fun activities and catching up on how everyone else was doing. As dusk started to settle in, we all were near the campfire for a few hours until around 11 p.m. Eventually, the family and ourselves called it a night and headed to bed. My girlfriend and I were offered to sleep in a bigger size 6-person earlier that day from her relative, who we'll call Mary. It was a kind gesture at the time, as we had only brought a 2-person tent. Having that additional space for our belongings and our air mattress was a nice added feature. Mary's tent was positioned not too far from the campfire and the rest of the family. The family did a wonderful job clearing and maintaining the area for their smaller RVs and additional tents. To the back of the tent, about 20 to 30 yards, is where the woods started with a semi-thick brush and trees. Us three were lying down chatting, and eventually they both fell asleep. For some reason I couldn't sleep, so I'm on my phone passing time, hoping to eventually drift off and fall asleep. This is when I heard faint activity in the woods about 40 yards back. I dismissed it right away as a deer. They're known for this area, and continued to space off on the phone, looking at random things. About 10 or 20 minutes later, I hear things getting closer to the tent. I could distinctly hear twigs snapping and moving between the brush, getting closer to the tent and clearing. This started to get my attention, as I could start physically feeling a faint shake in the ground as this thing or entity was wandering around. Moments later, this thing was 10 yards away from the tent, walking and running back and forth. Each step this thing took, I could physically feel the vibration in the ground. This thing was huge. The best way to describe this feeling is if you went to a rock concert and felt the kick drum hit your body. At this point, I was terrified, as I was trying to follow the footsteps running and walking at the back and side of the tent. The entity, or whatever this thing was, got at least 5 yards near the tent, and suddenly stopped near Mary's side of the tent. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, scared of what this thing was going to do next. I kid you not, a few seconds later, Mary shot up from being dead asleep. She gasped for air and was calling our names to wake us up. You could hear in her voice she was terrified. The entity hightailed it off back into the woods. Both of us were very startled at this point. The woods were dead silent, and eventually had enough courage to look out the tent. We saw and heard nothing, and 30 minutes later ran to their shop to grab a shotgun. Another anomaly during this whole thing, while we were alert and awake. Mary mentioned during this time I was awake, she was having a dream. She mentioned these entities were tormenting her, saying that they wanted her soul and wanted to kill her and to give it to them. My girlfriend dismissed the whole thing and said it was probably a deer running around. After hearing my girlfriend say that, I never told anybody about this until recently, and I started to think about it again and figured I needed to share this. Today's second encounter is a subscriber. Terrifying encounter. As an elementary student, back in 1971, I saw The Legend of the Boggy Creek, and it hit home. I later read Peter Bryan's little paperback book. The North Georgia mountains, especially the Appalachians, are rich with legends and stories of boogers. Parents and adults would say, "Don't be out at night, that's when the booger bears come out." Or, "Don't go there, the boogers will get you." Problem was, nobody would ever tell you what a booger was or how it looked, so we believed that it was only a scary story. In the spring of '73, a game warden went missing overnight and was found on a rural road walking the next morning by a passing car. Exhausted and confused with his clothes torn, and he couldn't really remember what happened. It was later said that he claimed to have seen a tall, hairy creature with a large head and a face like a bull. This story was buzzing for a couple weeks, and suddenly all the talk of it went quiet. We believe he either quit or the state relocated him. It was March of '74. I was 15 years old. I didn't drink or smoke. I was straight arrow football player and not the type to tell tall tales. At around 8:30 p.m., I was riding around in a car with 3 other guys, and the driver was a couple years older than us. We were spotlighting deer. Illegal, I know, but not for the purpose of shooting them, just checking them out. We were going down a main road. It was barely paved and was full of potholes. As we rolled along at around 15 miles an hour, we spot a buck and 2 does up on a chest-high red clay bank with bushes and overgrowth partially blocking our view. This was at a 4-way crossroads where the very narrow dirt/gravel right-hand road led off into a completely deserted forest with no homes. On the left was another dirt-gravel road with an old church on the corner. Further down that road were a couple of farms. A river runs down one side that is fed by the Amicaloa Falls, which is located at the head of the Appalachian Trail. Ironically, there is an area of the river known as Devil's Elbow, where moonshiners, car thieves, pot growers, hunters were alleged to have gone missing. This is the same area where the game warden went missing. I was in the passenger rear seat and couldn't really see the deer. We stopped, and the guy in front of me got out with the spotlight, an old D-cell, and shined the deer. It was apparent they had been running, and they were tired because they didn't haul ass when we lit 'em up. About 3 or 4 seconds after exiting the back seat, I heard a crack pop 45 degrees to my right in the forest. My friend who was sitting next to me heard it and said, "Oh my God, I bet that's a game warden." I said, "That's one noisy game warden." He then began urging the driver to get us out of there. About that time came some more noises, like something large moving through the woods. I instantly thought bear because a 500-pounder was killed in this area, but bears are known to be very quiet while walking. So I started saying, "Let's go," and the hairs started standing on my arms and neck, and I began to feel sick with fear. About that time, approximately 75 or 80 feet to my right, at a 15 to 20 degree angle, I watched a large creature cross the road from bank to bank in 3 forward-leaning large steps while swinging its arms. From the sound it was making, it appeared to be approaching the deer, and at that moment they bolted out of there. Now, let's pause for a moment, as I'm frozen with fear, and it seems like time had slowed down. My friend to the left says, "What the hell was that?" And now we are both saying, let's go," and I have one foot in the car. Then, as I look on the top of the embankment, I see the outline of the figure move slowly to get behind a tree, where its face/head was obscured. My friend with the spotlight starts slowly getting in the car while I and the other dude dive in the back seat. At this time, my older and more stubborn friend pulls out a .22 caliber pistol and says, "Who are you? Talk to me or I'll shoot." Now we're screaming, "Let's go," as he says it again. "Tell me who you are or I'll shoot." I think my friend in the front of me still has the light pointed at it over the door, even though he's back in the car. At that instant, we hear bang, bang as the driver shoots up in the air. He immediately throws the pistol down, jumps in the car as we spin out of there sideways. Now I'm shaking all over, so bad that my feet are actually tapping. Everybody but the driver is talking at once. I don't remember who asked first. I think it was the guy in the front. They got a better look. "Did y'all see that?" The driver was silent as we drove until we found a closed gas station and pulled in. He got out and went to the drink machine and downed a Coca-Cola and still wouldn't talk. So now my friend is driving us all home, and it's about 10 p.m. We're planning to go back the next day and look around in daylight. We also agree that only to tell our families, minus the part about the gun fire, of course. After we drop off my friend in the back, we're heading to my house. My friend in front says to the driver, "Man, did you see that?" Nothing but silence until we got to my house, where my friend in front says, "Did you see its face?" He very quietly said, I sat there for a minute waiting for more, but it was obvious that he wasn't talking, and it was getting late on a school night. I then had to get out and walk up a long path to the dark backside of my house, which sat at the foot of the mountains. When I got inside, my mom noticed that there was something wrong, and her first question was, "Has somebody been drinking?" Now, that was all I needed, so I finally managed to tell the story. My mom replied, "Probably the devil." But my dad, who grew up on a farm only a few miles from this incident, sat silent looking at the TV. It was his older generation on both sides of the family who used the term booger. Growing up on the farm, he knew all too well about the booger stories, and later said that he used to hear strange screamings in the woods. They always blamed it on panthers, but they were all hunted and killed by the early 1900s, and a few other people I shared this story with laughed and ridiculed me, so I shut my mouth until 1980. The following day, we all headed back, and our driver still didn't want to talk. We get to the location and can't find any footprints, but do find broken branches and impressions on the ground. Then we got to the tree where the face and creature was hidden behind. A prominent, crooked limb stuck out and bent upward. I could stand flat-footed and reach the limb with my arm almost extended. That puts the creature at about 7 foot, 10 inches, or possibly more. We went back 2 times at night to look, stupid and heavily armed, but found nothing, thank the Lord. About 2 months later, I was in church and I saw a girl that lived on the same road but closer to the main highway. I told her what happened, and a very serious expression overtook her face. She informed me that it had run across the road in front of her one night while coming home from a football game. She also said that her uncle saw it coming out of his chicken coop one year. I sat there silently thinking, oh God, why have you allowed these things to exist? In 1980, a new subdivision was being built near the encounter. A story started circulating that the first resident of this subdivision came home one night to find his back door broken down and his kitchen destroyed. Nothing stolen, just the kitchen destroyed. I didn't know the man, but all of the things he was relayed to my friend who drove the night of that encounter. Before church one morning, I again asked him some 6 years later if he had seen the face that night, and he nodded yes and looked away. My opinion is that sight of it really scrambled his eggs, and he didn't know how to deal with it. As far as I know, nothing ever came of the vandalized home incident, as the story died quickly, just like the game warden story. For some reason, I told my dad a story very peculiar aunt told me at the age of 5 or 6. She and my uncle lived in a house on the top of a big hill at the foot of a mountain about 7 miles from our incident. She claimed to have been rocking on the front porch one night, and a large, hairy cryptid with a very ugly face came around the corner and stood motionless looking at her about 8 feet away. She said that she felt paralyzed with fear and could only cut her eyes to look at it. She was unable to call out to my uncle sitting in the living room right behind her about a foot away. She claimed that she closed her eyes very tight and began to pray to herself, and a few seconds later opened her eyes and this creature was gone. I remember her saying the face was just so ugly. I asked my dad if she was crazy, to which he replied, "Folks thought so." A face like a bull. Now, a bull has a big snout, doesn't it? That's a very disturbing area to live around, especially a game warden going missing. Coming back out of the woods, his clothes are tattered and torn. He can't remember, air quotes, what happened, or he just doesn't want to talk about it. Anyway, this is my newest favorite video. You can see this Sasquatch walking through the woods. It is absolutely huge. And yeah, just check it out. And this will be the end of the upload. All right, guys, I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I want to thank you all for your support, and it truly means the world to me. Guys, if you are in the region where this huge snowstorm is going to be hitting, we're going to be getting hit with this storm tonight and tomorrow. They're calling for a ton of snow, wind 45 to 65 miles an hour. That's where I live, but they're calling this the storm of the century, the winter storm of the century. So if you are in the location of this storm, it's supposed to be a very large area, so multiple states. Please stay safe. Please make sure that you have blankets, wood, and everything else in case your power goes out. Stay safe, and thank you once again. May the Great Spirit watch out for us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.